Hello, and a very big welcome to the IAP2 webinar on the Core Value Awards. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat box, and the presenters will answer these during the Q&A session. This presentation is being recorded, and a copy will be available following the webinar. And now, over to our first speaker, Cathy Moses.
Thank you, Josie, and good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. So today we'll be focusing on what happens behind the scenes once entries close, and I'll be sharing on the practical side of entering your submission. So Ray and Amanda will share with you a judge's perspective and provide some important tips on how to make your entry stand out. So to kick off, a quick overview of the awards. This year, IAP2 Australasia is offering 3 major awards: the Research, Organisation of the Year, and the Project of the Year award. In addition to these 3 major awards, there are 7 subcategories: planning, infrastructure, environment, health, disaster and emergency services, community development, and the Indigenous award. Now, these subcategories sit within the Project of the Year award, and it is from these winners that the Australasian Project of the Year will be selected. This year, we will also be offering an Encouragement Award. This award recognises innovation in community engagement and is selected from all submissions, regardless of the category. Now, following the selection process, the major award winners are then submitted into the IAP2 International Awards. The International Awards receive submissions from right across the world and are judged by an international judging panel. Now, the judging process will usually finish up late August, so by early September, all entrants usually receive notification if they've been selected as a finalist or not. The winners of both the International and the Australasian Awards are then announced at the Core Value Awards Gala Dinner, which this year will be held on the Gold Coast in October. So that's a really quick overview of the awards, and more detailed information is available in the entrance kit, which is available to be downloaded from the IAP2 Australasia website. Now, entering the awards, it's really important to follow the guidelines that are outlined in your kit. We always work to helping out and assisting each entrant, but we're also very conscious of being transparent and fair to everyone entering. So if we have a submission that comes with heaps of additional documents, pictures, we still only pass on the information that is requested in the kit, and that gets passed on to the judges. It's really important to remember to make sure that your entry is no bigger than 2 meg, because if it is bigger, there's a good chance we won't receive it. Once you've submitted your entry, you will receive an acknowledgement email within 48 hours. Now, if you don't receive that, please give us a call so that we can chase up what's happened to your submission. But also have a look and check your file size. It might have been too big. And then as far as the size of your submission, your entry must be no more than 8 pages long. Now, this is single-sided A4 pages. So if you're working as a double-sided format, it means that you would only submit 4 pages with a font size of 11 calibri. Now, remember, the judges will only review the first 8 pages. Now, in addition to your submission, we request some other information, and this information is not counted in your 8 pages. And this is a 1-page summary of your project, organisation or research project. And we use this piece of work, if you're a winner, to put in the Core Values Showcase book, or we put on our website so that it's accessible to other people working in this space to see what sort of activities and projects are happening across Australasia. We also need your organisation's logos and referees. Now, a really important point to make here is that you need to let your referees know that they may get a call, because all referees are checked and we don't award any winners who have not had their references checked. And then the last piece of information that we ask for is an application cover sheet, consent to reproduce material, and then a checklist. Now, on the application cover sheet, we request the sponsoring organisation or organisations. Now, the sponsoring organisation will be the recipient of the award, so their name will be placed on the award or the certificate if they have been selected as a winner. Now, in the case of the research and project categories, this can be submitted by more than one group. However, the organisation of the year is only open to a single organisation submission. Now, this year we've also introduced a 90-second video to be included. However, it doesn't have to be anything complicated or expensive. It can be as simple as an animated PowerPoint. And this piece of work will be played at the Core Values Gala dinner to introduce each winner. Now, if you're having a panic or you're not quite sure where to go with that, please don't hesitate to contact Josie, who has said she'd be more than happy to give you some assistance. And then finally, the last important point is conflict of interest. Now, when the submissions are passed on to the judging panel, they are asked to declare any conflict of interest. So they review all the submissions and the corresponding projects. Now, a judge with a declared conflict of interest does not take part in any of the judging within that category. So hopefully that's addressed some of your questions, things that you've had concerns about. But again, please feel free to send through any emails that you may have with other questions you have, and we will come back to you as soon as we possibly can. Moving on, I would like now to introduce Ray Tye, who is a past Core Values Awards winner, convener of the judging panel, and also a past judge. And she will be speaking to you on the Project of the Year award category. Thank you, Ray.
Cathy.
Right now, I'd just like to
hi everyone.
Ray Tye, who,
entering these awards, it's a really great way to review your project or your organisational initiatives and showcase them not only to your peers and your organisation, but also to your stakeholders. Hi everyone. I imagine you'll have all had a look at the project categories that Cathy mentioned. Excuse me, I'm sort of losing my voice, so I'm trusting that it's not going to go before we finish this. The categories cover planning, infrastructure, environment, health, disaster and emergency services, community development, and Indigenous. And I think the descriptions sort of speak for themselves, but there are the two bigger ones, if you like, are generally planning and infrastructure. And planning is a vast category that, as you can see there, it covers a really broad range of planning activities, including energy, water, health, transport, policy, development or initiatives, planning of a service provision, and also, social economic development. It's urban, rural. It can cover all sorts of things: statutory, social, land use, strategic policy, etc., etc. And the infrastructure that covers similar things, but it's, for example, transport. Built infrastructure projects, road, railway, etc., they should come into the infrastructure category. So if you need help with where your project should fit, Josie will be able to help you with that. So, some of the guidelines, one of the most basic but vital parts of any entries, I suppose, is be sure that you read through the criteria. to understand what the judges will actually be marking your entry against, and follow that criteria, and then check you've covered them. The objectives, the challenges, methodology, satisfaction, and innovation. It's a little bit like, I suppose, a school assignment and tests. Do, at the very, very least, make sure you cover those off. Now, of course, as well as meeting those, what makes an entry stand out? Well, it's one of those sort of intangible things, really. When we look across, sometimes we get sort of 40, 50 entries, and looking right across them, you know, some will always stand out. And essentially, it's a great project showcased by a great submission. Sometimes as a judge, you sometimes suspect that there's a really great project in behind, but it somehow can be let down by the actual submission. Whatever you do, give yourself the time and the project the thought it deserves, and really showcase it as well as you can. So the best projects, you know, it's something special in its response to an issue, problem, or an opportunity, and it's something that nudges along the profession as well as the public's belief, participation, and belief in what we do. Around the criteria. Just a couple of notes. Innovation obviously can mean lots of things to different people, but you know, it's about, you know, an inventive or imaginative solution, or something that's been proven and done extremely well. It doesn't necessarily mean a project with a huge budget, or one that uses high tech, or a huge project such as say a 30-year plan for a state. Obviously, those lend themselves to bigger and brighter things often, but something done extremely well will shine through. You don't have to have, there seems to have been a bit of a misconception that you need to have done a citizens' jury as part of it, or participatory budgeting. It's not about the techniques, it's about the application of the techniques and your response, as I say, to the issue. Give yourself plenty of time to draft and then really craft your entry. Don't be like me when I entered a few years ago, and I really did leave it to the last minute, and then realised that I hadn't made any reference at all to the core values, and that's a really important step. It's the Core Values Award, and you need to show that you have not only acknowledged the core values, but that you have applied them in, you know, in as many areas as you can. Now, the Encouragement Award, that is, quite often we'll be looking across multiple entries, and some might not be, they might not necessarily float to the top, as it were. They won't win their category, but there's something really quite special in there, and judges will identify there's something really worthwhile, and it either shows real promise or a strength that deserves special mention. So even though you might not think you've got the biggest or brightest project to showcase, but your the way you managed it and your response will shine through. I'm going to hand over to Amanda. Thank you, Amanda.
Hey. Hello, everybody, and thanks so much for joining. I'm going to talk through the Organisation of the Year and the Research of the Year award. They're different from the Project of the Year, but they're still very much bolted to the core values. And so I'll start with the organisation of the year. And if you've had a look at the entry pack, you will see that this is an award that is very much bolted in how the core values are applied at an organisational level. And it really is focused on how you have embedded those core values into decision making throughout the organisation. Certainly there's a recognition that it's a long process of embedding engagement within an organisation, and you can be entering at various stages, but need to be quite clear about that. One thing of note that's very important is that the category recognises the work of one organisation. It's not about a combined organisation entry, and so it won't qualify, so there's no point. So focus on one organisation. What you're looking for really, if you look at the judging criteria, is to show that the commitment to core values extends right through policies, strategies, practices and procedures. They're the areas where you can show that you've really embedded it, not just in one project, but at an organisational level. The second criteria really is about the leaders in an organisation and that they have a good understanding and that they've integrated it into their public participation processes. So this is around, is it embedded into business as usual processes? How can you demonstrate that the leaders have embraced engagement in a really fundamental way in the way in which they operate and the way in which they make decisions? You then need to be able to talk about the level of participation with stakeholders and others. And we're looking for here, or have in the past, how much you've integrated those and gained support from stakeholders and communities. So rather than just saying, hey, we did a great job, we've really embedded it, can we demonstrate that others have thought that as well? There is a section here for how internal staff participation has set the tone for public participation. So it's a little bit of how you've walked the talk. And then you've got to provide some evidence. So the evidence is around the commitment, but also the effectiveness of it. Evidence is critically important for the awards. It's certainly an area where you can generate more marks from judges because rather than saying what we did, it's actually talking about, or what the intent was, is actually talking about outcomes and how you've made some sort of internal change. Address the major challenges. So the organisations who've submitted for this awards, they talk about the challenges that they've had to face. It's certainly not necessarily a Disney approach to doing engagement. It's a very well thought through, evidenced approach. And as we all know, there can be times where engagement is tough and that there are major challenges and we have to address those. And you'll see you've got to provide referees and so forth for it. The research award is certainly one where I think we'd love to see more people submit for the research award. The first part, though, is identifying this problem and challenge. And so you've got to have a research question or problem, and it really has to align with public participation. The point of the researcher work is to show that actually we need some hard evidence around the practice, but also you'll note that innovation doesn't happen by accident. We actually need to ask good questions and think about facing those challenges in engagement. What are we doing in order to produce research? You'll need to describe what those findings are, and you'll need to think about how solid are they? What evidence have you got to it? And then what about the theoretical framework that underpins your research? So have you done a literature review? Have you have you attached your research findings to any theoretical framework? The last point in that research award is really bolting it to the core values. So again, they become really fundamental to making a really good submission. There's in the research award, it's not around you, for example, producing a product. It's not around producing a product for yourself and then submitting that, because one of the judging criteria is that there'll be a contribution to the body of knowledge, and that is the body of knowledge in the field of public participation. So certainly sharing of results and also the practical application of it. And this is not just within your own, for example, organisation, but it might be more broadly as well. If you can talk about that, that would be excellent. And I think that's probably all for me on those two, the Organisation of the Year and the research project.
Thank you, Amanda. Thanks, Amanda. Really appreciate that. So we had a few little questions come through, and the first was, my project won't be completed until May. Is it worthwhile me entering the awards? So Ray and Amanda, what are your thoughts in response to that?
Well, you can enter at a point in time, because you imagine a 10-year something. Obviously, if you waited till the end of the 10 years, it would be, you probably might not even be around to do it. So do it at that point in time, and just explain the status. And as we know, there are different phases, especially in a big project, or embedding engagement into an organisation. So it's about your initiative and efforts to date, but it's good for the judges to know where you are at in that.
I would also add that I know that in the past, for one of my projects, I was partway through the project. It didn't make sense for me at the time, because I knew I'd probably do better if I entered it the following year, in that I would have better data. I'd be able to get references from community and stakeholders that I wouldn't have had because I was partway through it. So for me, that was just a judgment call. But I agree with Ray, it's just the fashioning of that and being really, really clear as a judge in reading those. And there's huge volumes when you're reading it, but people are quite clear about that they're at a certain stage.
Actually, that actually leads in really nicely to the next question, which came through, that if I have previously entered an award, can I resubmit? So, I mean, the criteria does not say they can't. So, that is not a problem as far as the criteria. But what are your thoughts, Ray and Amanda?
If you didn't win the first time, I would take a long, hard look at yourself and don't enter the same one. Reflect on how you could improve it. Sometimes people, when they've entered, they don't actually respond to the core values, or other times, if in terms of weak applications, it can be that they've made submissions and it's clearly not much effort's gone to address core values. It might be a general kind of award submission they might have used elsewhere. So it may just be that if you're going to re-enter again, make it a much better approach and think about those core areas, those core questions, and how you could improve that.
I agree, Amanda. In the past, we've had a couple of entries that have been put across almost all the categories for the projects. So they are a bit of a general sort of thing. And the weakness of that approach is that they're not actually addressing the criteria of whatever, say, project it's about. So rather than do a sort of one-size-fits-all, and it's better to be really specific about what category you are going for. But then, as I said before, really make sure you address the criteria and fashion it around those. Emphasise the connections to the core values and whatever whatever is unique to your entry.
Thank you, Ray and Amanda. We've got a question from Brett, and he says, could we please have clarification about one organisation in context of government departments?
Sorry, I don't understand the question. One organisation.
If I'm right, Brett, this is in reference to Organisation of the Year, where the one entity would be awarded the award or be recognised as the winner.
Yes. So, for example, if you were making if, for example, you were entering a Project of the Year award, sometimes you get dual applicants. It might be a government organisation who does it jointly with a consultant, or it could be a group of organisations together. That's not the intention of this. This is about how a particular organisation has embedded engagement within their own organisation. So it's certainly not the one where you would have an organisation plus a consultant. If you had you probably wouldn't have, for example, a multitude of organisations who were working together in a loose formation, but presumably if it was a structured entity that had been formed and that was a specific organisation, that would be okay. I'm not sure that I've answered that well enough for Brett. Ray, is there anything you could add to make that a bit clearer?
No, it's essentially, as you say, for example, two government entities, for example, might do an engagement initiative. That's not what we're talking about. They could enter jointly in a project category, but the organisation is where you work and that organisation's efforts to embed engagement into everything they do. So it's a very internal thing. They might have external sort of applications of it, but it's just by your organisation for that organisation.
Okay, Brett says, thank you very much for the clarification. We've answered the question, so thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Ben would like to know, would it help to mention the budget or lack therewith in the entry submission?
Well, it wouldn't do any harm. It's certainly not obligatory, but some, as I said before, some very innovative engagement solutions have come out of a project with relatively little money, if almost none, and what they've come up with. So there's not really. it's the response rather than the amount, if you like, that's important for the judging.
Actually, and I remember in some cases, one of the challenges was a lack of budget, for example, and but you'd have to answer that as a challenge rather than just here's the amount that we spent.
And then I do have another question. Hopefully, Ben, that has answered your question. Please post if you want some more clarification. But we've got another one. What happens if I enter the wrong category?
Well, if it's really apparent, Josie will get back to an entrant and suggest that this really isn't a good fit to give you the very best chance of shining within a category. And some of those are really more obvious than others. Some of the confusion sometimes has come between planning and infrastructure, and there is that good example of transport. If there's planning around, say, a future rail proposal, that would be in planning. If it's the actual building of that rail, the infrastructure project, then that goes in the infrastructure category. But Josie will be able to guide anyone who's not sure. And if something comes through and it just is in the completely wrong area, then Josie will suggest to that entrant that they would give themselves a better opportunity if they changed categories. It doesn't happen very often.
Thanks, Amanda. So, Brett, you posted a question about the international awards. So, just to answer your question, yeah, you're correct. We, the winners, the Australasian winners, project, research and organisation, if they are selected, because again, we only select them if they're of that standard, we automatically submit them into the international awards. So that is something that we do. And we've had tremendous success with a lot of Australasian submissions winning in different categories. So I hope that has answered your question. We will be wrapping up soon. If anyone's got any more questions, you could just let us know. Amanda, Ray, did you want to make any last comments?
I think go for it. Submit an award. Have a go. I know it's really scary to think that you might submit something and others will pass judgment upon you and you may not win, but you can't win if you don't enter. I think we do amazing practice in Australasia, and one thing is that if you win an award, your organisation will be so delighted in the work, and often we don't get the sort of celebration or recognition that I think all of our dear colleagues deserve. So be inspired, have a go, and spend a bit of time. Don't do as I've done, as Ray said she's done in the past, and wake up in the morning and think, oh, geez, I better put an entry in, because you really won't win.
One thing, I judged for a couple of years and then convened the judging panel for the next 2, and it's been a huge privilege to see across all the entries, and it's been a real learning thing for me, just reading through that there's so many gems in there, and it's unfortunate that there's only one winner and runner-up in the category, and one ultimate winner in the project, and one in the organisation and research. But as Amanda said, the level of engagement work and innovation that's happening in Australasia is really, really impressive. And each year, some of you will already know that IAP2 puts out a little booklet called the Core Values Awards. Is that what it's called, Cathy? And reading through those, even though it's just a snippet of each of them, gives you a good idea of the breadth of what we do as a profession and the changing nature of it. So the whole showcasing thing, I think, is really, really good for our profession, and it's great for you as an individual to enter, and also for your organisation. So, like Amanda, I would simply encourage everyone to do it.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Amanda. I've just got some questions that have come up, which I can respond to quite quickly. And again, it was covered earlier, and I do apologise for the audio issues that we had, and we will fix that up when we send the link out. But regarding joint submissions for the Project of the Year award, yes, you can. You can do a joint submission for that category. And then regarding the size of the submission, we do understand that 8 pages is tough. Possibly that may be reviewed in the future. However, at the moment, 8 pages is what you will be judged on. So by putting appendices and attachments, while you can do that, the judges will not receive them. We have to be fair right across the board. So we ask for those 8 pages, and that is what the judges will be given. Now, Ben, you've asked if there is a template that you could use. I don't think at the moment that there is an actual template. You'd follow the, I would suggest, the way the questions have been asked in the entry kit, showing the how, you know, the sort of question or the questions they're asking you to respond to. But it is a good point, and it's something that perhaps we can look at for future talking with Josie.
Cathy, can I just add one thing which I should have said before? The page limit's really, really tight. So if you can, or what I've seen at least, where I've been judging and thought, wow, that's amazing. How can they cram so much in? They've been able to put lots of words into something that is diagrammatic or a process or a table that seems to help to describe some of it. Now, I'm not saying you have to do it. It's just that where there's been a couple of occasions I thought that's a really clever way that they've been able to distill a huge amount of information in a fast way.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, Amanda. Thank you, Ray. So we're just about coming to the end of the webinar. I'll just thank everybody for joining us and for posting your questions. If you have any more, please don't hesitate to keep sending them through. You can send them through to Josie, who will then get some responses and answers for you. Again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Ray. We will send out the audio recording of this webinar. And again, apologies for those audio issues. We'll have them sorted and fixed so that you'll be able to hear with clarity the start of the webinar. So without further ado, I think we'll just call that to a close. And please get writing and submit away this year. We look forward to receiving your submission. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Cathy. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.